Yo, what is going on, guys? This is your boy Anvil here, back with another one. And I psyched you guys out. It ain't ORAS Viability Drinking Wednesdays. It's on Tuesdays now. And we'll see what day it's really on for the next one, too. But as you can see, we stayed true to the promise. There is a Manaphy on the screen. And most importantly, screw that Manaphy. I also have with me my partner, Saera T. What's going on, Sarah?
Hey, not much. Just taking it easy.
Okay.
Yep, that's it.
Nice. Uh,
Nice.
so this is the A minus tier, a little bit short of S and A plus, but these mons not super astounding. They can do a lot of work in certain situations. Sometimes they're dead weight, but other times they can be some of the most threatening mons in the tier. The offensive ones, at least. The defensive ones are pretty okay too, but we'll get into them. So first off, Bisharp. So I know many people think of Bisharp as like an offense killer, and I think that is true in a sense that it can threaten a lot of teams with Swords Dance boosted Sucker Punches, and not only that, it is also used on offense as like a hazard removal deterrent. So for those of you guys who may not know, Bisharp is usually ran with Defiant as its ability. So what happens is if any of Bisharp's stats are lowered, its attack gets boosted by 2 stages. So for example, if your opponent's supposed to like defog away some hazards, right? Like Sticky Web. So once they defog and Bisharp comes in on that, then it'll get boosted its attack 2 stages, so it doesn't even need to set up a Swords Dance, and it gets a boost that way. And not only that is its defensive typing is alright, but most important is that offensive typing. Dark and Steel is a pretty fantastic offensive typing, especially when this thing gets access to Sucker Punch. And what Sucker Punch does is allow it to take out faster threats that don't really resist it. So stuff like Tornadus, for example, usually would outspeed it, but +2 Sucker Punch can help deal with that. It can deal with a lot of other faster threats like Mega Metagross, Thundurus, you name it. So that's why Bisharp is pretty nasty. And I'd also want to say that Bisharp is like one of the best knockoff users in the tier. I'd say like it's secondary to Weavile. Like if you're worried about getting too much hazard damage off on your Weavile, or if you're you want like a strong knockoff, not like a Tornadus knockoff, like a strong stab knockoff, then Bisharp is usually your go-to. And the set that people usually run is SD, Knock, Iron Head, Sucker Punch. And some people run Pursuit sometimes, but I'd say most Bisharps you will see are SD, Iron Head, Sucker, and Knockoff. But yeah, that's all about Bish. I think I talked way too long, but you got anything else to say?
Yeah, so, yep, no, I think it's got it all. It's got great offensive typing. Dark's great, and anything that doesn't like Dark, won't like, anything that can handle Dark won't like Steel. So, like, Fatal, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mon that can really snowball. Really, the main thing that stops it from being even better is speed tier can be better. You can be outplayed. The Sucker Punch could be great, but also if you Will-O-Wisp it, you can kind of neuter it there.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, it's a mon you can't underestimate, and one of those mons you should definitely keep in mind in the builder. Okay, so now we'll talk about the Diancie Mega. The Mega Diancie is one of the better Megas, I'd say. Even though it's defensive typing, I think it's pretty poor. Like Rock and Fairy. It's not a great combo. Quad weak to Steel, weak to Ground, Water, Poison, I believe. I think. Is that neutral? I forget.
I think it's neutral.
Okay, well, in any case,
Like,
the steel weakness is pretty big because it'll basically just die to a bullet punch from like a Scizor.
yeah.
But when it megas, it gets 110 speed, and for as bad as the typing is defensively, it's incredible offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And with those coverage options, it gets Diamond Storm, Rock, Earth Power, Ground, and Moonblast for Fairy. So that together, all those three together, hit basically everything for East Neutral. And Diancie has like 160 base offenses. So
Yeah.
it hits really hard. So nothing really likes coming out on it.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, it's very weak to priority, but it also is helpful because you run it with Protect, and then you get your Magic Bounce off, and it'll... Once again, like Bisharp, it's a hazard deterrent. So if your opponent sees your Mega Diancie, they'll think twice before getting up hazards.
Yeah.
And they'll just bounce them back on their side. So it's a pretty great mon offensively, but if the opponent has like a Scizor, it's basically just kind of like if they don't play well.
True. And also a disclaimer, like we've been doing previously, it's better to run Earth Power on your Diancie rather than HP Fire. That 350 speed is pretty nice. You don't want to decrease it. And being able to hit Heatran and Extra harder is pretty nice. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. But yep.
That's good.
Yep. Diancie, very underrated Mega. People do shit like don't like it as much just because of that BP weakness and other steel weaknesses. But if you pair it with the right mons like Talonflame or Spike Stacking, then it can put in a lot of work. And I think it's a really solid mon to use versus a lot of bulky offenses because they really don't have a switching into it. And I think people have started to use it a bit more on hyper offenses, like you said, as a hazard deterrent. I think X-Ray or Vulpix made a team with like screens plus a Diancie Mega, so Diancie Mega gets off the rocks, and then Serp gets up the screens. It's pretty nasty, but Diancie definitely. If you're like offensive type of guy, you want to go hard offense, then yeah, Diancie is your go-to Mega.
Yeah, for sure.
So next up is Gastrodon. So Gastrodon, I'd say, is a pretty controversial pick here because I feel like a lot of people think it's dead weight, but sometimes it can put in a lot of work. And I think a lot of the higher level players can acknowledge that the typing and role that Gastrodon provides is very hard to replicate with some other mons. I'd say the biggest deal with Gastrodon is not only that defensive typing, but it's also those immunities to water and ground. I mean, water and electric, which are pretty nice. And unlike other water ground types, it also has recovery, which is pretty nice as well. And I'd say the biggest thing about Gastrodon is its defensive synergy with so many different mons in the tier. Like water ground, I mean, we've heard about this with the Swampert and ADV already, but when you slap recovery and more immunities onto a mon like this, it becomes pretty dang solid. And you can pair with so much different stuff. Zapdos pairs well with it. Talonflame pairs extremely well with it. Heatran pairs well with it. Serp pairs well with it. And like many of the other water types in the tier, also has that access to that Scald plus Toxic combination, which is extremely hard to switch into. And it also has a means of dealing with the setup mons as well, with the niche picks like a Clear Smog, or I've seen some guys like John Filch, they use counter on their Gastrodon to do with a lot of physical attackers. And that is pretty nasty. And there's also that underrated hidden set, the Curse setup Gastrodon, which can honestly put in a lot of work versus a lot of teams. I honestly think it can like 6-0 a bunch of the meta, as long as it doesn't get burnt. But still, it's a very scary mon nonetheless. And I think it's also in A- tier just because that while it does have so many things going for it, it feels a bit passive at times, and sometimes it does become dead weight. With enough chip, it honestly like do as much as you think it would. Like for example, if you're using Gastro as your Keldeo switching and the opponent has Focus Blast Keldeo, then that Gastro ain't switching into um and then it kind of goes like, oh man, I expected Gastro to live that hit, but it really didn't do well. So sometimes it's hit or miss, but I think overall it is a pretty solid defensive mod to have on your team. And if you're not aiming for like regen with stuff like Slowbro, if you're just aiming for those immunities and trying to scald and toxic stuff down, then I think Gastro is your go-to mod for that.
Yeah, it's just a solid team player with some nice utility options. But I think another thing that keeps it in A- is it doesn't have access to hazards. It's a passive, as you said. It's got pretty mediocre offenses. 83 attack, 92 special attack. But bulk's really good. Typing's really good. You mentioned the Storm Drain to make it water immune. But you can also even do Sticky Hold, which has been popping up more recently if you don't want to get knocked off. Yes. Oh yeah, it's Solomon.
Yeah.
Okay, now I got Latias. So Latias, I think this also made me feel maybe a little high for some people here, but Latias, I think unlike Latios, has some really interesting things going for it. So the biggest one I can think of is a Healing Wish. So Healing Wish, especially if you're running like a hyper offense or something, it could be like invaluable. Like if let's say you have like a Mega Metagame, right, and it gets burnt while you're trying to break a wall, right? Like the wall burns you, but they still knock you out. Later on, Latias can Healing Wish itself, sacrifice itself to bring back the Mega Metagame or whatever, and suddenly, it feels like you have like a 7-on-6. You give one of your mons a new life. Additionally, what it has over Latios is the better bulk. So it has better chance of living a Pursuit Trap. Need be. You can like more viably run it defensively. You can run the trick Choice Scarf thing.
True.
Does well with that. It has T-Wave, has Defog, has Refresh. Although I don't think you run Refresh on base Latias, but yeah, Trick, Defog, T-Wave, Healing Wish. Yeah, it's a really great support mod. And the speed tier, 110 is pretty amazing. Like when things are 110 and like support, like the chances are they're getting their thing off. They're getting their move off.
True, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really solid support mod, especially for hyper offense. And I really, in general, you can do a lot with Latias.
Yeah.
I think it's
there's
solid one.
there's so many like different niche options, but they all put in like so much work. Like you said, T-Wave Latias is an option, and I think as a Weavile, like if you're using like a Weavile, you always have to watch out if your opponent is T-Wave Latias, because if you're trying to pursuit or something and they're like end up being Colbur and they live the hit and they get a T-Wave off, that can be really devastating for a Weavile and some other dark types to deal with. And I think it's also people don't really think of this as much, but I think it's also a solid Volcarona like check, I'd say. Not really a check, but it can disrupt Quiver Dance Volcarona if it's the Scarf Latias set. And so what Scarf Latias does is it outspeeds Volcarona at +1. It can trigger the Scarf, so it locks Volcarona into a certain move, and that helps you revenge kill it a little bit easier. But it's very underrated in that sense. I think you can still put in some work, and I'm sure there's like plenty other sets that people use. I know Healing Wish and Screens has been gaining more popularity.
Oh, it's Screens. I forgot about Screens. My God. Yeah, this is one of the better Screen users.
Yeah, so that bulk is very nice, and it's primarily, I think it's that bulk that separates it significantly from Latios, as well as those niche options, like you said, with Colbur and T-Wave, and most importantly, Healing Wish.
Yeah. Also gets a Reflect type. I forgot about it. So you can change your type. So they bring in a Tyranitar, you can Reflect type it, and suddenly your Latias is like Dark Rock. So then you can switch out the Pursuit will do nothing. There you go. It's got so many little things it could do that are all annoying. That's why it's here.
Um,
All right.
so so next up is Magnezone. So Magnezone is here. It's a pretty dominant mon, I'd say, but it's usually run as support for most of the other wall breaking mons in the tier. So usually you see it ran with Pokemon that has trouble with other steel types. So sometimes you see it run with Diancie, sometimes you see it run with Scissor, sometimes you see it run with Altaria, sometimes you see it run with Metagross. You guys get the idea, but it's an excellent support mon. It doesn't do much, but it does its job well, and that is to trap steel types and check fairies and so on. I'd say the biggest role that Magnezone has, in my opinion, is being able to revenge kill Manaphy. Because I feel like if for anyone who's in their I hate Manaphy or I hate Manaphy phase, they probably rely on Scarf Magnezone instead of the more defensive answers, and it's pretty decent at doing that. And yeah, the main thing with Magnezone is you want to trap the steel types, HP fire them, and then help enable the breaker on your team like Diancie and Scissor to go in once the steel is removed. And it can also be used as a check, like I said, to Manaphy. Its speed tier is pretty decent. It can outspeed up to I think it's a bit slower than Thundurus-Therian, but you can outspeed, I think, up to Superior with this.
Yeah, speed superior.
But yeah, that allows you to also deal with stuff like Thundurus as well by being able to take it out with some Thunderbolts. And yeah, it's also used as I'd say a pseudo check to fairies, because most of the time fairies will switch out versus this, but you can like flash cannon Clef. That I think that's about it for the fairies. Most of them, yeah, will probably switch out. Still gotta watch out for Calm Mind Clef, but other than that, great job at trapping the steals.
Yeah, that's another thing I want to say about it. So usually you'll see this Scarf. Sometimes Specs. Sometimes Specs Analytic, which hits like a truck. That's hits really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I really like the Substitute set. So Substitute, like you set up on you get to sub up on like a Ferrothorn, right? And chances are they can't break it. So then you HP ice them. HP fire them down. They're gone, and then you're still in there behind the sub, and they bring your next one in, and then you do a lot of damage to that. So it can get, sometimes it can get even like 2 kills or like 1.5 kills basically with that set. So I think it's a pretty solid mon, even though I don't use it too much these days. But it's a really great enabler for other stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Magnezone. So Manaphy, the blue demon itself.
Oh yes.
Manaphy is pretty straightforward. It gets Tail Glow, which is a +3 to special attack, which is ridiculous. So it turns its pretty mediocre 100 special attack stat into like +3, which is pretty ridiculous. It hits like what, like over 700 something, like fully invested.
Yeah.
No, even more than that. What am I saying? It's like 900 something.
Oh shoot.
So yeah, and it gets decent enough coverage options. So you got Scald, Surfs, you got Energy Ball, you got Ice Beam, you have Psychic even. That's more relevant in Sun and Moon. But you can even just do HP Fire, and that can kill certain Ferrothorns up to +3 if you're max attack. I'm sorry, max special attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's typically why you see Manaphy. It's a pretty scary setup sweeper because Tail Glow is really good, and Manaphy actually has like really great like natural bulk. It's one of the what they call like the Pixie Pokemon, kind of like Mew and Celebi, where it's base 100s and all the stats. So it's naturally bulky. You can make it even bulkier. And some people run it with Rain Dance, so you can't even status it. So you really have to just like beat it down before it can sweep you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just a scary, scary threat. But the reason why it's an A- tier is it doesn't really do much else besides offense. So it's pretty straightforward. So you can, if you build your team or use a team, like, and you see that preview, generally, you would hope you have a good matchup against it, or have like some kind of game plan, and then it won't be that bad. Also, with the rise of Volcanion, which we're going to get to in a bit.
Oh yes.
It's taking Manaphy down a peg, but we'll talk about that more in a bit.
True. I also do want to mention with Manaphy, I think its niche is like you said, that bulk and tail glow. So most of the sweepers in the tier, I'd say they have like the drawback of being severely punished while they're trying to sweep, or they have some really like negative trade going for them. So for Volcarona, for example, it's one of the most deadliest sweepers in the tier, but it is still held back by its mediocre defense and that stealth rock weakness. Same thing with a lot of fire type sweepers like Talonflame and Zard, and as well as some of other sweepers like Bish and so on. But with Manaphy, it has that niche of being able to set up on most things. It really it's very hard to KO like the bulky Manaphy set. I think like Thundurus cannot even KO it, and then Zard Y cannot KO it with the Solar Beam and so on. There's only a few mons that can outright Oko bulky Manaphy like Sceptile and Life Orb, Thundurus and Rose Raid and stuff. But the main annoying thing about Manaphy is that on screens it is pretty hard to deal with, and there's also like very niche but annoying sets like Salic and Substitute that are pretty like demonic in my opinion. Like Manaphy can be a pretty disgusting mon, and I'd say this is A minus tier, just because of the fact that it's not only Manaphy you have to worry about. Like you also have to worry about its other the other threats on the team as well. And behind screens, I think Manaphy is the most dangerous thing in the tier. The Rain Dance set can also bust through unaware mons like Clef, which is also pretty annoying. Yeah, I'd say this similar to what Sarah said. This isn't as high as S tier and stuff, but because it's very situational. I know a lot of people in the past, they didn't like Manaphy and they thought Keldeo was a better special breaker, which makes sense. But the thing with Manaphy is that with Manaphy, you oftentimes overload on the support so that it can put in a lot of work versus teams that cannot pressure it hard enough. And this is why I think it's caused the most dramatic changes in the tier recently, because Manaphy has been a infamous culprit on webs and screens at the same time. So most of these theme variations forced the metagame to adapt and deal with it in a more offensive manner compared to defensively, because there simply weren't many defensive options that could deal with Manaphy. Even stuff like Chansey could get destroyed by Rain Dance Tail Glow Manaphy, and that weird sub leftover Salic, that stuff can also go in. Volcanion, I'd say, is the safest switch in, and as we mentioned, we'll go into that a little bit later on, but definitely a mon that has shifted the tier as of recently, and because of those infamous traits of its. Yeah, I kind of went on, but I think it's a worthy mention, because it for people who don't really prep for Manaphy, seeing this is like it makes you feel a certain way, because sometimes it just goes in. It feels so stupid at times. Like, why is this even here? Why is this even a mon? But yeah, this is what Manaphy does, and I think the metagame has the tools to beat it, but I feel like it is a bit restricting at times. But still ways to stop it though.
Yep.
Next up we have Slowbro Mega. I feel like Sarah is more expert at Slowbro Mega, because I feel like they definitely know how to use it more than I do. Maybe they can talk about Mega Slowbro a little bit.
I don't know if you want. So Slowbro. So we talked about Slowbro before, like the base Slowbro.
Mm-hmm.
a nice defensive pivot, regenerator, T-Wave, slack off, a good bulk, all that good stuff. The Mega though, so Mega's actually lower tiered because it's kind of like a late game cleaner, but it's really interesting compared to other late game cleaners. Usually, other Megas, they either wall break or if they do set up, they raise your speed or something. Slowbro Mega is a little different. So Slowbro gets, the Mega gets Shell Armor, which changes its ability from Regenerator. So what Shell Armor does is it prevents critical hits. So typically the issue when you're working with like bulky Slowmons is that they're prone to getting crit, after a while. But that's not the case with Slowbro. So the main game plan with Slowbro typically is you wait till the end game when you don't need Regenerator anymore. So you trade like a regular Slowbro in the beginning, somewhat, like just dishing off Scalds and switching in or whatever and switching it out. But at the end of the game, you start setting up your Calm Minds and your Mega, and what will happen is you get to a point when you're set up enough, and then you just attack. And then the opponent, unless they have like Haze or something or Roar or something like that, they can't really stop it. All they can do is set alongside you and I guess hope that they have like coverage or they like paralyze you or something or status you. If they can't do that, chances are Mega Slowbro will win out.
Mm-hmm.
And some people even run like a rest set with like Iron Defense, so they raise their defense too, which is already incredible. Like base 180, and then they just rest off any like toxic or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And
they just beat you down that way. So it's a very like slow, painful death when you're going up against the Mega Slowbro. But like I said, though, it's not infallible.
Mm-hmm.
If you have toxic, if you have Encore and something like that, you can stall it out pretty much. Or if you just have like a dark like a dark move on, like maybe like a Specs Hydreigon, you can pressure it. And then they won't even get the opportunity to set up. But outside of that, very very scary, but in a different way than most other threats.
Yeah, I also want to mention I think Slowbro as a sweeper, it has its own kind of niche because it's like one of those psychic types that doesn't care about most dark types. So just to give you guys an example, if a Weavile came in on normal Slowbro, it would do a buttload of damage with the knockoff. But versus a Slowbro, Mega Slowbro that is Calm Minding up, knockoff doesn't do anything. I think it does like 30 max. From Banded, Stab, Max Attack, Weavile, that is pretty insane. And sometimes Mega Slowbro runs stuff like Flamethrower and can destroy stuff like Weavile and Ferrothorn with it. Also, other knockoff users like Bisharp can also get destroyed by it. I'd say the only thing it really has to worry about is, like you said, Haze and Roar and stuff. But this is one of those things that it's a very slow rolling snowball. But once it gets going, it kind of just grabs kills left and right. As we mentioned before, the reason it's not A+ or higher is primarily because it sometimes it does take a while to get going, and secondly, that can be an issue versus more hyper offensive teams that can pressure Slowbro and prevent it from setting up, and that lack of regen can also be a bit annoying at times. But still a very underrated Mega. Like it can put in a lot of work, and I also think it's one of those mons that can 6-0 a lot of teams in the meta.
For sure. Alright, and Volcanion. I think you should end off on that one.
Okay, so as we mentioned before, Manaphy has been a very tier-defining mon, and one of the solid answers to that has been Volcanion. So Volcanion, a lot of the previous usage of Volcanion has been like the spec set. So people used to run that with Pursuit to trap like the Latias, and then Volcanion just went in with Stab, Steam Eruptions, and Flamethrowers, Earth Power, Sludge Waves, you name it. But recently the defensive set has been gaining more traction lately, and for good reason. So defensive Volcanion had been a solution by some builders like Urzangle to deal with both webs and screens abusers at the same time. So I remember he was sharing some replays on Smogon where he was testing Volcanion versus webs, and the Volcanions was easily able to survive like +2 scissors attacks and survive +2 Bisharp's attacks and so on. And the additional thing that Volcanion can also do versus screens is that it can roar out Manaphy or haze it and deal with it that way. It can also deal with most variants of Volcarona, barring HP ground, which I think it doesn't kill from full unless it's like Life Orb or something like that. But Volcanion is very versatile, man. I think some people can switch between more defensive sets and more SPDF sets, but I think the main traction it had in SPO was the fact that it was just like so bulky. It feels like a tank chomp that has really good offensive typing and utility. Like I remember one game, I think it was also Persephone versus Raptor, where where Raptor just went for a Diamond Storm on Volcanion. Volcanion ate the hit and then just KO'd the Diancie back with the Steam Eruption. And that's what Volcanion can do sometimes. I think it is a pretty solid Stealth Rock deterrent from the likes of Excadrill and Landorus, because you can honestly just stay in on those bonds and Steam Erupt, which is really cool. That and like as we mentioned before, that Scald plus Toxic combination is pretty nasty. And when you have Scald on steroids, which is a Steam Eruption, then it becomes pretty dang nasty as well. And we think that it's not necessarily A plus or A tier just because of that rock weakness and the lack of recovery it has. The bane of any defensive Volcanion user, in my opinion, is getting the leftovers knocked off and or being statused.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is really unfortunate if you get statused on Volcanion, because a lot of times Volcanion runs Protect. So if you're like Toxic or something, then Protect is basically useless. So not only you have a useless slot, but your Volcanion doesn't become as good as a switch-in as you thought it would be. And I know some people in the comments have been saying that like Volcanion should be as high as Slowbro, or Slowbro should not be as high because Volcanion can put a stop to it. Well, I think in my opinion, like in regards to having like a solid water type switching, Slowbro I think is a bit better than Volcanion. Sure, Slowbro can get Toxic, but Slowbro can switch around its movesets. You kind of only need Scald and Slack Off. You can change T-Wave to Toxic too pretty easily. I think X-Ray.
Don't tell them that.
I think X-Ray used a team with that, with Dragonite and Weavile and Toxic protect Slowbro. But yeah, it's pretty easy for Slowbro to lure in other water types and also click Toxic too, which is why I don't think Volcanion is really deserving of that high up, just because other water types with better recovery can outlast it usually. And I think it's also bait for knockoff Clef too, because I know Volcanion loves switching it to Clef. So I think Saera built a team with Sticky Barb Clef, if I remember correctly, with Trick.
Yeah.
And yeah, that thing like destroyed my Volcanion. I think in a test game we were playing. Once he tricked the Sticky Barb onto me, he could just calm mind up. He didn't care. Volcanion was on a timer, and it was basically useless at that point. So that's I'd say the main bane of Volcanion. You really don't want to get knocked or Toxic, and but its defensive utility, man, it has a pretty solid defensive typing, and it's really nice at dealing with those nasty, annoying HO teams and Manaphy. So it has my respect in that sense. And don't sleep on the spec set too. That can still put in work nowadays.
Yeah, I love specs. But yeah, I was going to say another thing about that. So Slowbro doesn't really need any team support. You just throw Slowbro on a team, and it is a team.
True.
It is support. Volcanion, you got to worry about rocks. We said we got to worry about like Toxic, T-Wave, knockoff. Like Slowbro doesn't really have to care about any of that stuff. Even if you knock it off, you just slack it off, and then you switch out. Then whatever, you still got the regen. you get toxic, whatever, you just can't stand as long. But then you just regen it off and then slack off again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not necessarily the end for Slowbro. Volcanion, you know, it's great if the opponent has nothing for it, but that's really the case, and it really does appreciate like the rocks, the hazard removal, which, like I said, Slowbro doesn't care about. So
Mm-hmm.
I have no issues putting Slowbros on most of my teams.
Mm-hmm.
Volcanion, as much as I love it, it needs a little more help, and it's a little more situational, but it is definitely really good. Like you said, the stab combos, the natural bulk and offense, you know, that stuff's great. But I don't think it's as good as Slowbro. Also, Slowbro has T-Wave. Like, come on. Like, best move in the tier.
True.
Doesn't get T-Wave. They're still good, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to B+ now.
Oh,
B+
yes.
tier.
We're in the B's now.
Yeah, so, much like we said, it's Volcanion needs some team support. These guys, too. And they have some other flaws, which we'll get into.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll start off with Chansey. So, Chansey is the prototypical and stereotypical Stallmon. You know, with it Eviolite, basically as bulky on the physical side as Swampert, or even more so. And it's even more ridiculous on the special side.
Mm-hmm.
So it can take a lot of hits. You know, it can just kind of take, you know, even super effective hits on the special side, like they're nothing most of the time. It's got Rocks, T-Wave, Toxic, Heal Bell, Wish, which is funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think in real life, it's very rare to find a Wish Chansey that's like, you know, like only a handful of people actually have it. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, on Showdown, you know, it gets Wish. It has like the fattest wishes, of course.
Oh,
like
yes.
250 HP or whatever. You know, it's just fat, doesn't die, and it's annoying. So for that, it does its role well. And like we said, it's basically like makes stall possible, pretty much. That being said, it's very altitude mon, for instance, right? With like higher than base 100 HP, you know, so you can have like 101 HP subs, or if you do like that pressure against it, so it's very easy to exploit. And you know, there's a lot of mons that it doesn't like switch into two. Doing rank for him.
Mm-hmm.
Her. I think that's all I got. Anything else, Anvil? Or?
Yeah, I think
Two. Well, on offense too, but
yes.
It's pretty passive.
Mm-hmm.
It chants the offense. It's a thing. Not a good thing, but it is a thing.
Yeah, true.
Alright, you want to tell us about Zard Y now?
Oh, yes, Zard Y. So, Zard Y, I think it dropped off in usage recently, but it is a pretty solid Titan of the past where it's a little special nuke. And I think most of the reasons for why it dropped off is primarily because ORAS speed tiers have slowly gone faster and faster. So it is really hindered by its speed, which honestly isn't too bad to begin with. Like base 100 is pretty solid, but everything's everything's like moving a bit towards like the 350s, 360 ranges with the stuff like Keldeo, and I mean not Keldeo, like Superior, Thundurus, Tornadus, those guys running around more. And because of such like an offensive oriented metagame, it's really hard for Zard to get going. Just because everything outspeeds it. Honestly, and that's the thing holding back, along with that stealth rock weakness, of course. But it really is an underrated mon. Like it is extremely hard to switch into unless you have a Chansey, like we mentioned above. And yeah, I think it's been gaining a little bit of usage lately because it has a decent matchup versus screen. So because of Zard's wall breaking potential, it's hard to set up versus it, and that's why it gets a little bit more reputation there. And I think with the right support, it can still be a really solid mon, even in today's offense-oriented metagame. I haven't really seen that many Zard teams as of late, but I think usually when Zard is used, it's paired with Sandrill, and Sandrill, as we mentioned in our previous team building videos and stuff, is really solid means of speed control, helps deal with the offense and such. And I think that maybe if you pair with stuff like Superior or T-Wave Slowbro or T-Wave Clef, then you can still put in a lot of work with that right team support. But other than that, it is, like I said, it's held back by its speed and that Stealth Rock weakness, demanding a lot of support.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say though, I think it's fast enough for beating a lot of the bulkier stuff. So it's definitely a wall breaker for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to reset weather when you're with sand, playing it with like a Tyranitar and stuff, that's very valuable. And they both kind of support each other really well. So I don't know. I and you can easily just put T-Wave on stuff to slow stuff down and let Zard scare it out.
Yeah.
And it does get recovery. It does get Roost.
Mm-hmm.
You pretty much should run Roost. Yeah, I think it's pretty solid. And definitely a scary mon if you don't have like a solid answer for it.
Yeah.
All right, Crawdaunt, one of my favorites.
Crocroo.
So Crawdaunt, in my opinion, is the Aqua Jet user in the tier. Like not Azumarill, not Dragonite, Crawdaunt. So Crawdaunt has 120 base attack, which is solid. That's the same as Weavile. However, unlike Weavile, it can and should run Adamant Nature.
Yes.
To make it even stronger.
Indeed.
Plus, unlike Weavile, it also gets a really good ability. Not that pressure's bad, but it gets really good ability in adaptability. So normally, you get the same type attack bonus for stab when you use the same attack as your typing. So for Crawdaunt, that's water and dark. However, adaptability turns that 1.5 to 2. So it basically gets like, extra 50% damage on its stab attacks.
Oh, yes.
And then you pair that with like, Life Orb or Mystic Water or Dark or Black Glasses or Choice Band, Swords Dance, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing is just like all calling everything. So, it's incredibly fun to use. Like it hits so hard, it gets priority. Like it has great typing offensively. Water and Dark basically hit everything. It's here. I'm struggling to think of something that it doesn't hit. It basically hits everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's relatively frail. It doesn't have a great speed tier. That's why some people run Jolly, but those people are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You just gotta deal with that you're not outspeeding certain things. But nothing really wants to come in on a knockoff from this thing or a Crab Hammer. And you get this thing to +2, and you get some T-Waves going. This thing's a menace.
Mm-hmm.
I love it so much. I think it's so good.
Yeah. And for those people who may not know how to play Crawdaunt, I think the closest thing to it is like Mega Medicham, like how you play Mega Medicham. So you want to get it in versus like a fat mon, a slower mon on like a double. And I think Crab Hammer is like the closest thing you can get to Mega Medicham high jump kick without it being a Mega Medicham high jump kick. So yes, like Sarah said, it is held back by its frailness, but it really does have a niche. Unlike Weavile, where you're not weak to rocks, so you can switch into them pretty frequently. And Aqua Jet is used to revenge kill so many different threats in the tier compared to like Ice Shard. Like Crawdaunt is like one of the banes for Sand to face, just because Jet can knock out Excadrill, and it can also destroy T-Tar, and
Volcarona.
Yes, oh yes, Volcarona too. And there's so many like interesting sets you can run with it. Like I think Faded Keys ran Switcheroo Crawdaunt, and I think in our unreleased Mega Sceptile Live we ran Switcheroo Crawdaunt and beat like Mob Barley with it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it can definitely put in a lot of work. Uh, Crabhammer is so satisfying to click, and it's like I said it's similar to Mega Medicham in that sense because Crabhammer I think can 2-hit KO it like resists sometimes. Like I think Keldeo doesn't like switching into boosted Crabhammer. Some other mons don't like switching into that either. And unlike Mega Medicham, Crawdaunt gets adaptability, stab, banded, knockoff, which can 2 KO stuff like Ferrothorn. Which is pretty crazy. And yeah, it's insane, man. And
Yeah.
I think there was a movement of Craw users that started. I think a lot of people in ORAS think it's a very underrated mon, and it can put in a lot of work. I think Amir's in there, we're in there, Keys is in there. I think some guys from the other ORAS server are also in there, but Crawdaunt definitely an underrated pick. Good versus stall and offense, which is also pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, next up.
Dragonite. So Dragonite, I'd say is one of the most annoying DD users in the tier. So I think the only good comparisons are Zard X, which we don't think is as good, and Gyarados Mega, which I think it is also pretty good. But the main thing about Dragonite is multi-scale, and Dragonite has been seeing a lot of usage recently. I think on screens, but it's been used a little bit on bulky offense too. So what multi-scale allows it to do is it reduces damage that Dragonite takes if it's at full. So it can most likely get a Dragon Dance on every single mon in the tier except for like some Mold Breaker or Terravolt mons like Kyurem B. And because of that, it can set up pretty freely, especially if it's like Lumberry, so it doesn't even have to care about status. And then its attack is very high, so it can OHKO a lot of stuff in the tier once it's at +1. And it also can outspeed a lot of things in the tier, barring stuff like Mega Lopunny and Mega Manectric, like those mons and above. And I think the most devastating thing about DD Dragonite is its access to extreme speed. So if you're trying to revenge kill Dragonite with Weavile and trying to Ice Shard it, well, Dragonite can just E-speed you, it out-prioritizes you. Link in the description, by the way, for our priority video where we go more in depth into the different speed and priority tiers in ORAS. But E-speed out-prioritizes Weavile, it takes it out. If it takes rocks damage, that is, and it can help deal with stuff like Talonflame too. Out prioritizes Brave Bird, Acrobatics, that so on. So very dangerous mon to deal with. Only reason it is not higher is because of the various ways you can break multi-skill. And if multi-skill is broken, it's very hard for Dragonite to get up a DD safely. Usually, it's pretty easily revenge killed. I'd say if the multi-skill is broken, then that can be by various means. It can be via Rocky Helmet damage, sand damage, status, of course. It can also be broken by a bit of priority too. So a lot of times, if there's like a Lopunny on the field, for example, you can just fake out into Ice Punch and take out the Dragonite, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why Dragonite is held back, just because it needs a lot of things in place just for it to sweep. And sometimes it doesn't even sweep because there's a lot of mons that can still take a hit that are frequently used. Clef is an example where it can easily take most hits from Dragonite +1. There's also certain phasers, like we mentioned, Volcanion that can take a hit, as well as some like bulky fatter mons like Hippowdon and Skarmory that can also take a hit and just phase Dragonite out. And then once Dragonite is phased, it usually does not come back in and sweep again. So that's also another annoying thing about it, but still threatening under the right circumstances.
Yep, definitely a threat. Honestly, the there was like a roof sub Flygon. Sub Fly Dragonite set. which I used once, and like I felt bad using it, so I stopped using it.
Oh,
It's pretty easy to exploit, and I recently lost to it, so I definitely it's something to take serious for sure. Okay, now like you mentioned, Mega Gyarados as like a similar-ish kind of Dragon Dance user. So Gyarados, Mega Gyarados is in a similar speed tier, a little faster. Got you know, different stabs. Actually, has stabs, which has over a Dragonite. It lacks the extreme speed, so it doesn't have priority. But it gets Mold Breaker, so it doesn't care about Levitate mons. So it could use Earthquake, unlike Rotom, for instance.
Oh yes.
Like Waterfall, Crunch, Earthquake, Ice Fang. Those are the typical coverage options for it. And what's nice is it gets a lot of extra bulk when it Mega Evolves. You can kind of play it interestingly. Like, for instance, if they got like a choice locked Landorus maybe, and they're going for Earthquake, you could just Dragon Dance up in regular form, and they keep doing it until they switch out, or they go with something that wouldn't appreciate it. There's a lot of like ways to play around it with it, but it's definitely threatening, definitely scary. It's yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's really straightforward.
I think also another thing that we should mention about Mold Breaker is that it's one of the things that gives Gyarados a niche versus stall. So it's one of the few sweepers that does not care at all about unaware users. So you can punch through like unaware Clefable pretty easily. You can punch through Quagsire pretty easily. And that Scissor Stall, man, you can just punch through that like piece of cake. But yes, Gyarados is pretty solid, and unlike Crawdaunt, which is kind of unfortunate for Crawdaunt, I'd say, but it has really solid bulk, and with that offensive typing and access to DD, it is a pretty menacing threat. I'd also say most of the reasons why it's held back is because of that speed tier, and you may be asking like, what Gyarados gets access to DD? Why is the speed tier an issue? Well, it still gets outsped by some of the faster threats in the tier. So like
Scarf Landorus.
Yeah, Scarf Landorus, for example, is very annoying for Mega Gyarados. Stuff like Scarf Rotom is also pretty annoying. And then I feel like ladder is pretty weird in that sense, where like if you try ladder with something, it feels like all your opponents have the correct counters for it. I feel like a lot of people feel the same way. I feel like with Mega Gyarados, you'll start seeing like Scarf Rotom, Scarf Landorus is way too often, and that would be annoying. And I think in my previous game, I think versus Typical Bastard, he used like a Alakazam, and that outsped the Gyarados, and that was pretty annoying to deal with too. So it honestly, I think Sarah and I were having a discussion about this before, but it is like held back. It just needs a little bit more speed, and it would have been fine. But it's still like held back by it. But it's also one of those screen sweepers. Like you can put it on there.
Screens.
Yeah. But it's like we said, it's like many of the other monsters to tier. It can be very dangerous in certain scenarios, but often held back by the various flaws that we mentioned.
Okay, you got Heatran. So, featured on top.
Oh yes, so Heatran. So people were using Heatran before they started using defensive Volcanion, and the main reason why Heatran was used, I think, was more as like a fairy check. So it was used to deal with Clefable, like taunt, Calm Mind. It could like taunt stuff that way. I honestly, this is probably a controversial opinion, but I don't think Heatran is that good of a rocker. I don't think it sets up on much.
Yeah, I don't think it's that great either. The rocker.
Yeah, it's like, it feels like one of those mons that like it does have like a certain niche of being able to be immune to Toxic and Will-O-Wisp, and it's similar to Volcanion in a sense where like you are a fire type that can deal with other fire types pretty well. And you also lack a bit of recovery, so you gotta rely on leftovers. So that's where Heatran is a bit better than Volcanion because it doesn't get wisped or toxic. But I think the main reason why it's not higher up is because of that HP ground Volcarona usage and HP ground other mon usage and Focus Blast, Thundurus, and Manaphy, and EQ on Dragonite. But basically, what happened is with all this screens HO going around and people running so many different options for coverage to hit Heatran that its usage like went way down. And as we mentioned before, it's not really that good of a rocker. Like, what is it set up on? Like Clefable only. Like it gets beat by like everything else, which is kind of unfortunate.
Ferrothorn.
Oh yeah, Ferrothorn too. But yeah, similar to Volcanion, it really hates getting knocked off. And Saera and I have this meme about Clefable and Heatran, and basically the people who say, "Oh, Heatran can 1v1 Clef," they're not correct at all. Because if Clef is running the right set, then Clef can 1v1 Heatran anyways.
Yeah.
With the T-Wave knockoff stuff.
Yeah, a little support. I've done it before, guys. I'm pretty sure I've replays.
Yeah, so Heatran,
It's really silly.
yeah, it's one of those mons where like the defensive typing is really great, but it can be taken advantage of in so many different ways. It's like it depends on team comp whether it's useful or not, in my opinion. Like a lot of times you're better off using a more offensive check to fire types like Talonflame, or using Volcanion, which is a bit better versus Volcarona and Manaphy.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the main good set now for Heatran is Scarf. I think it's a solid Scarfer. Because it outspeeds Mega Lopunny, and he can hit pretty hard back. But but besides that, a more defensive one that just spreads toxic and taunts and stuff and protects, which honestly is kind of a luxury. I don't think most teams can afford to have a slot with a mon that just kind of like is there just like stall out stuff and be annoying without like getting rocks or anything. So yeah, I feel like Heatran is more of a luxury pick now that many teams can't afford. But in a vacuum, it's still a great mon. It's got a lot of things going for it. It's just right now in the meta, I think, Volcanion, like we said, kind of usurped it.
Yeah.
Okay, now Hydreigon. So I love Hydreigon. It's probably one of my favorite Pokemon, honestly. Just like in general, it's like design wise. So Hydreigon, it's a dark type, which there are many of them. And it's a especially offensive dark type, which are even rarer. So, this thing is super weak to fairy. Quad weakness to fairy. So basically, like dies to anything. It's a fairy attack. But outside of that, it has a lot going for it. So it gets pretty great coverage. You get Dark Pulse Draco, of course. You get Flamethrower, Earth Power, Surf, Flash Cannon, Super Power. I don't know if it gets Belch yet, but I know in Gen 7 it gets Belch.
Oh, yes.
It gets U-Turn, which is one of my favorites. It gets U-Turn, gets Roost, gets Taunt, T-Wave. It gets so many things. And I like just putting a Specs on this boy. This bad boy. Just like, Specs, Dark Pulsing, everything. Yeah. It's really great in the sense that there's not really anything else really that does what it can do. There aren't really many turning dragons besides the Flygon, which I don't think is really viable in OU. And there's nothing really with like that actually hits hard with Dark Pulse, or there's very few things I should say that hits hard with Dark Pulse, and having those kind of coverage options. So it's got solid speed here, 98, so it's a little bit lower than you'd like against some things, but it also outspeeds things like Excadrill. Adamant, Mega Metacham, Landorus, so Bernard Scarped. So it's got a good enough niche there. But yeah, it's really good. It just really hits really hard, really solid. There aren't many things in the meta that really prepare for like especially offensive dark type.
Mhm.
So it's it could really surprise or mess up some teams.
Yeah, true.
It also pairs well with things like Mega Metagross, for instance, which is nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's about it. Another pretty straightforward offensive move.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of pretty straightforward offensive mons, we also have Keldeo, which is up next.
Yeah.
So Keldeo is an interesting pick because its usage has been kind of like going up and down throughout its history of being in ORAS. So it was a pretty solid mon. Back in 2016, I remember when watching Blunder and CBB, it was like one of the top mons to use. And then its usage kind of dropped off a little bit. I think it was like during the webs and screens meta, which honestly, like, I don't know why it dropped off in the webs meta because it was a pretty solid way to deal with Bisharp and Scissor. But yeah, I think Keldeo, I think it will be one of those mons that is and will always be good. I know people have been saying that like Keldeo is not as good of a water type anymore. There's Manaphy around, there's Volcanion around that's a better offensive water. But I think Keldeo, it not only has that niche about Secret Sword being able to hit on the physical side, but Focus Blast should not be slept on. Like I know people have been dropping Focus Blast recently. I don't know what's wrong with you guys, but Focus Blast Keldeo, guys, one of the most difficult things to switch into in the tier, if it hits, that is. Your Volcanion will not switch into a Focus Blast Keldeo. So for those people thinking that Volcanion can switch into Keldeo, no, that is not true. Same thing with Gastrodon. Gastrodon cannot switch into a Focus Blast Keldeo.
Secret Sword, you can't switch into really that well.
True. And then those guys switching, thinking their Tangrowth can switch into Keldeo. No, that cannot switch into Focus Blast Keldeo either. So
Strong Focus Blast, guys. Don't be a baby.
Yeah. So definitely a mon not to be slept on. And I think the way things have been going on in the meta, I think Sarah mentioned this a bit earlier too. Slowbro, which loved to switch into Keldeo, and had changed its set to invalidate the spec set a little bit, and it is now running like Scald, Ice Beam, T-Wave, Slack Off, can now be setup fodder for Calma and Keldeo nowadays too, which I think is also a very underrated option, and I think it can put in a lot of work versus a lot variety of teams. I think Sarah had a team with a Taunt Keldeo, which is also pretty scary.
Yeah, that one could be really threatening under certain conditions.
Yeah, so
sure.
I'd say I know we were talking about like how the metagame has shifted to a more offensive way of dealing with things, right? So for example, I'd say Keldeo has a pretty solid niche of also being able to check other water types like Manaphy. So instead of relying on a more defensive answer to it like Ferrothorn, or using like a more defensive answer for Weavile or Scissor, you can just use an offensive answer like Keldeo. Keldeo's defensive capabilities are often underestimated. Like it can switch into Weavile sometimes, which is pretty nice if you wanted to. But yeah, water fighting, really solid stab combination. It's very hard to switch into. Scald is menacing. Most of the Scald switch-ins in the tier get decimated by Focus Blast. The only exception being Jellicent, which you can easily run support for. Yeah, I'd say it's very a solid wall breaker, and that speed tier is really solid. I think it's the fastest water type in the tier, if I'm not mistaken. Now that Greninja's gone, is it the fastest water type?
I'm struggling to think of anything faster. I think you're right. I think it is the fastest.
Yeah, so it's really solid, and being that fast, like it's like similar to the Zard Y in a sense, but it has better speed. So you can punch holes through teams with the Keldeo pretty easily. Don't have to worry about rocks. You resist rocks actually, so you don't take as much.
Starmie exists. Starmie's faster.
Oh, true. Storm is a little
There's
bit
one, guys.
faster.
There's one, but
Yeah,
Stormy, whatever.
yeah, but yeah. So Keldeo's a wall breaker who's pretty darn fast. So it's really nice to have on a team. I think it is pretty slappable too. Like it's easy to build support for it. Um, yeah, it can put on so much work, and I think there's different mons that can work well with it. I think Altaria works really nice with it. I think Mega Latias also works really nice with it. But yeah, that solid mon all around. It's not as high up just because like I said before, metagame is shifting to a faster state. So stuff like Lopunny, Megamane, Tornadus are running around a bit more. And people have adapted to Keldeo just as they have adapted to Mega Metagross. So there's plenty of switch-ins, even if one Keldeo set is dominant like Specs, people can still find ways to play around it nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Specs is definitely not as good as it used to be. But I think there's still potential with Keldeo, as you said, with the Calm Mind, either with like a substitute or taunt.
Mm-hmm.
Still a good mon, just I think people haven't experimented as much with it. All right. So next up we have Mega Latias, another one of my favorite megas. Although this one is definitely more niche compared to Mega Altaria. So Mega Altaria, I'm sorry, Mega Latias. Much like a regular Latias, is more defensive oriented compared to its counterpart, Mega Latios. Now, the really cool thing about Latias, though, it gets sword power, which you can run either substitute or I like refresh. Run that with Calm Mind, and you just keep setting up, and you don't care about status. And eventually, you get high enough where your stored power is like base like 200 something, and you're like what over 1,000 easily. I forget.
Yeah, I think
you're really high special attack with really high base power move. So at that point, resists aren't resist anymore, and everything just drops, except for dark types, and that's why Latias Mega is over here, because as strong as it is, as scary as it can be, that set is pretty invalidated by dark types, namely Weaviles and Scarf T-Tars and Bisharps. All of them can handle it pretty well. So it needs a lot of team support, or you could run like a setup move with it. Although you don't have a great setup move for all of them, or really any of them, because Weavile will always outspeed, Choice Tyranitar will always outspeed, and Bisharp would practically kill you with one sucker punch, if not just outright KO you. So because of that really big flaw, it's not as scary as it can be. However, most people aren't like me, and they use it more as just pure support. So Defog, T-Wave, Roost, Ice Beam maybe could be a set. Some people like Bolt Beam with Roost and T-Wave or Roost and Defog, which I'm not crazy on, just using my Mega slot for that. But some people really swear by it. But in any case, it does have flexibility like regular Latias, as I mentioned in the last year. But for me, like I'd rather use it offensively. But in that case, it's not as amazing. So if there's no dark type, this thing goes crazy. Just goes crazy.
Yeah,
if there's
yeah,
dark type, it's better to be support in that case because you get T-Wave and stuff. But yeah. So basically, just like regular Latias, taking a Mega slot, which makes it worse in many situations, but also could make the offensive set viable. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. And on a similar note, I'd say Latios. I might put it a little bit lower, but I think Latios is best used nowadays not as a defogger anymore, because with webs and Bisharp and stuff running around and so many mons in the tier being able to capitalize on defog Latios, I don't think it's that good of a defogger nowadays. I think offensively, though, it is still a threat. And in a similar sense to Keldeo, it is very hard to switch into. For its ability to use Psyshock, similar to how Keldeo uses Secret Sword. So Latios can hit the physical, just like Keldeo can. And Latios has, I think, a niche of being like a good Calm Mind user, or decent Calm Mind user, I'd say. I think Saera and I had the most success with Calm Mind Life Orb Latios, which I think can take out a large portion of teams in the tier, with the right support, that is. And I think Amir has been using stuff like T-Wave Latios to lure in stuff like Tornadus, and that can put in some work sometimes. So I think Latios is one of those fallen titans like Heatran, where the metagame has not really favored it as of recently. It still has a solid role as a strong special wall breaker. Speed tier is a little bit better than Keldeo. 350 is nice, but it pays the price with that typing being weak to pursued. And it's a bit frailer than Latias, so I might put it a bit lower than it, but it still can put in some work with the right support. If you're able to T-Wave, Weavile, and some of the faster threats in the tier, then like the Calm Mind set can put in a lot of work. I think maybe Scarf can also put in work to revenge kill Volcarona, but I haven't seen Scarf Latios in like forever. Yeah, I think the main thing is just like don't run defog on this, guys. It's not worth it.
Yeah, they're not great defoggers, a lot of these. Mm-hmm. I will say though, I do think Scarf is still pretty threatening because the speed tier is really good. Mm-hmm. You can trick something. You can Memento, which is like that's its It doesn't get a healing wish, it gets Memento. But, it could be handy sometimes, but really I think you want to trick with it. So you trick your Scarf away with that, or revenge kill stuff. Draco still hit pretty hard. The 130 base attack, still nice. Yeah, I think Latios is still scary. It's just, just like Mega Latios, it's the dark types that keep it from being even better. Mm-hmm. And this thing is just pure Weavile food.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But besides that, I think there's still a place in it for it. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're getting to Mew. So Mew's interesting. So Mew, for anyone who doesn't know, it basically gets not every move in the game, but like most of the moves in the game. So you could basically run like any kind of Mew you want. You can run support, which is the most common way to use it, being like a defogger, stealth rocker. You could even run it like offensively with like a Swords Dance or Nasty Plot or a Rock Polish or Agility or whatever it gets. It can pivot. It has like gets what am I trying to say?
Like momentum moves, like Volt Switch and
yeah, it gets momentum and such. I forgot what I was gonna say now, but it gets a lot of stuff they could work with. Yeah. So I think the thing with Mew that it has over, let's say, Mega Latias and Latios is it's got better bulk all around. I think it's got the base 100s and everything. So you'll very commonly see this with the Colbur Berry, and it gets Wisp. There you go. That's what I was gonna say. It gets Wisp, so it can actually punish the dark types that would come in.
Oh yes.
And it can outspeed pretty much all of them besides Weavile. But you just Wisp it, and then then it's crippled. So the other two, it can T-Wave it, but they can't really scare it like Mew can. So Mew also gets a ton and stuff. It gets so much it could work with. And the dark weakness, like I said, is a little more manageable with that Wisp. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very flexible, very annoying. Whenever you see it, you think, okay, what am I giving up to this thing? Like it's Wisps.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I think
Oh, and it's pink. Pink things are usually good.
Yeah, but that is an excellent point.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot.
Being pink allows Mew to switch into stuff like Mega Metagross, Mega Medicham, Lopunny, that sort of stuff. So that's why
Oh, yeah, yeah.
we mentioned why pink stuff is pretty good.
Yeah, there you go.
um, yeah, it is very versatile and it's actually a good defogger, unlike some of the other picks in this tier.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on to Pinsir Mega. So Pinsir Mega, I think, is similar to Gyarados in the sense that both these mons are very threatening under the right circumstances. So the main thing with Pinsir you gotta worry about is aerialate boosted returns and aerialate boosted quick attacks. So with Pinsir, you have not only access to extremely strong stab moves in aerialate boosted return, but you also have priority in quick attack to deal with faster threats, and you have feint if you're a mirror.
Oh no. Not worth it.
So Pinsir stabs are extremely hard to switch into. I think you have electric types to worry about, but it's pretty easy to run coverage for them. Close combat is the closest thing that comes into mind. You can hit stuff like Rotom with it, and you can hit the most of the rock types in the tier with it too. Tyranitar gets destroyed. Ferrothorn gets destroyed by it. Heatran gets destroyed by it. EQ can be used, but it's more of a thing in Sun and Moon, I think. But yeah, Pinsir can also pick off faster mons like Tornadus and Keldeo and Serperior with boosted quick attacks, which is very nice for it. And yeah, I'd say the main deal with Pinsir is being able to break through bulky offenses and some fatter teams as well, because most fat things get easily 2-hit KO'd by unboosted Pinsir, and usually get OHKO'd by +2 Pinsir. And I'd say the main thing holding it back is that 4x Stealth Rock weakness. So unlike Charizard, which has access to Roost, Pinsir doesn't have space nor access for Roost. So yeah, true. So it is held back by that because usually if rocks are up, it has a certain number of switch-ins left, and sometimes it can be an all or nothing mon where like if you get an SD off and they punish you on the SD, then it's gone. Or if you're too scared to SD and you switch out and you keep taking hazard damage, then it ends up doing nothing, which is also unfortunate. Not to mention that it can get like beat by a lot of priority users in a tier. It hates facing stuff like Revile because you can also always pick it off with Ice Shard. It also hates facing Talonflame because Talonflame is like an automatic like no sweep possible for Pinsir. Like Pinsir cannot sweep as long as a Talonflame is on the field. And that's kind of the annoying thing with that too. And then yeah, there's like I think Pinsir is very matchup reliant in that sense because sometimes it goes in as 6 host teams like straight up. But other times it gets like completely walled and it can't really do anything unless it has the right support. Like you have to run some sort of way to deal with Talonflame and Zapdos and stuff. So people usually, I think, run it with with the Rotom to wisp stuff like that, or deal with them with some other way by tricking and so on. But I think it's deserving of B+ tier just because it can put in a lot of work under the right circumstances, and only reason it's not higher up like many of the mons on this tier is because of things holding it back, like being able to be revenge killed pretty easily, being weak to rocks, no recovery, that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of support for sure. But yeah, it's definitely really scary here. I think it's the scariest Mega here, honestly, for most teams. Okay, now we have Suicune, an old oldie but goodie. So Suicune, you don't see too much, but still really threatening. So this is one of those mons that has pressure. So you can run it with Protect and or Substitute to like basically like outstall your opponent, and then you just set up Calm Minds, and this thing that's already pretty fat gets even fatter.
Oh, yes.
and it becomes really difficult to break through. And it has rest, so it can run a lot of different things that are all very annoying. So there you go. But generally, you'll see this thing with Scald, Calm Mind, and one of those moves I mentioned. And it'll just set up, and if you don't have like a way to break through its subs, to threaten it, or sub alongside it, and try to, 50-50 chances of winning it that way, it may be an L. So even though this thing is a thing, technically it's UU, it's by no means like a pushover in OU.
Yeah.
It's defenses and typing. It's bulkier than Manaphy, and like we said, it's also more annoying than Manaphy, I'd say.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure even like Amoonguss, you can EV, so Amoonguss won't break through your subs.
Yeah.
So, on paper, it looks like it could beat it. It may not necessarily beat it.
Yeah, true. And I think it's one of those mons where usually you can't 1v1 it. You have to 2v1 it. You have to maybe get your Tornadus in, try to get a knockoff in, then try to chip it down with some of your other members. It is very. It's I think Joey said it once in one of his videos, but when you see a Suicune, you're like, Suicune, shoot. And usually it's a nuisance, and which actually, I think if you unscramble the letters of Suicune, it spells out nuisance, so that makes a little bit of sense, but I don't think it actually does, but yeah,
we'll roll with it.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, so a bulky water with setup, pressure, Outlast its its answers oftentimes, and yeah, it's just unfun to play with or to play against. Excuse me.
Yeah.
All right. And then the last one.
Ooh, Thundurus. All right. So Thundurus is also a very underrated mon in the tier. I think it is one of the scariest to go up against if you don't have a proper means of revenge killing it, because number one, that coverage is nasty. Thunderbolt, HPI's Focus Blast hits so many things. Like if you don't have a Gastrodon or a Hippowdon or Chansey on your team, you are basically done for if you cannot outspeed this. Like that Thundurus has been a menace on screens, but it can also, it had been a menace on webs, but it's also a menace on screens too. And it's one of those mons where it can 6-0 teams on preview, and sometimes you can do nothing about it. And I think the mark of a good builder is to be able to deal with this in some way, shape, or form. Because I think Saera and I, whenever we are building a team, we always gotta be like, all right, do we have something for Thundurus? Because yeah, I think that's one of the things you gotta check off in your team builder. At least be able to play around it. And yeah, I'd say the main thing holding Thundurus back is the rock weakness, but also there are ways to punish it with priority too, with priority eye shard and stuff. But I think it's kind of weird to say, but sometimes Thundurus doesn't put in as much work as you'd like it to. A lot of the mons you want to set up on can still punish you in some way. They can either severely chip you or knock you off and stuff like that. A good example would be if you're trying to set up on a Slowbro or something, Slowbro can just Scald in front of you, and then you're burnt, and then that puts you on a timer. Similarly, setting up in front of Clef is dangerous, because if it's Life Orb, Ice Beam or something, then you're kind of screwed. Even stuff like Ferrothorn, if you try to set up on it, can do some Leech Seed, Protect, knockoff shenanigans, which is also annoying. So it is it looks like it can 6-0 teams, but sometimes it doesn't. It can still grab kills, but it is held back by I'd say utility moves and coverage options and bulky grounds. But yeah, I think I'd say it's one of the most threatening special attackers in the tier that isn't like a mega. And its speed tier is nice. It's actually like above the crowded 110 speed, so I think it hits like 353. So that outspeeds so many different things, which is really nice.
Yeah. So pretty much to sum it up, great typing. It basically got Zapdos typing, so not quite as good defensively because it doesn't have the stats or Roost defense and recovery to heal up. But it's got a great speed here, nasty plot, prankster, and you can even run like a mix set or physically offensive set with like a bulk up and defiance or something like that. So kind of like we said with the Bisharp. So it's got like all the coverage moves it needs. It's very threatening. Don't sleep on it. Yeah. All right, so that's the B+ tier.
Now moving on to B.
So I'll start us off.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to go through this tier really quick.
Yeah.
So Amoonguss. Sus. So it's a regenerator mon. So it's got interesting typing and grass and poison. So it's a very easy switch into things like non-flamethrower or non-life orb flamethrower Clefable. To Keldeo. Other water types. And it gets access to Spore. So, one of the few ones that gets access to it. And that's pretty solid. It gets access to Clear Smog. So, like Gastrodon. Well, this one gets Stab, so it's not as bad as is on Gastrodon. So, Stab, Clear Smog. It gets Foul Play. So, you Clear Smog everything that isn't a Steel type. And you just Foul Play the things that are Steel types. So, it's got ways of punishing setup a lot among this. Of course, you can run Toxic. Don't really miss because it's a poison type. And you can run Hidden Power Fire for your Ferrothorns. And got a Giga Drain. And you can run Stun Spore if you want to run like a double status move. And you can run Spore and Stun Spore. So you sleep the first thing that comes in on you, and then you Stun Spore the thing they switch into next.
Oh, yes.
So, pretty straightforward mon. It's defensive. It's relatively bulky with the regenerator. It has some annoying support moves, and it's a solid regenerator mon. Although I'll say it's a little more niche than Slowbro, for instance, or Tornado's Tea.
Yeah, I think you hit the nails on the head with Amoonguss. It's a pretty annoying mon to deal with.
Yep. Now Azu.
Alright, so Azumarill, similar to Crawdaunt, it's one of those mons that can revenge kill Volk. I'd say it has good offensive and defensive typing because that fairy can put in a lot of work. Azu is one of those mons that can 6-0 its teams after a belly drum. And if you don't have the correct coverage options or you don't, if your defensive checks are weakened like a Rotom and stuff, then it can absolutely decimate certain teams. It also has access to priority Aqua Jet, so it can pick off faster stuff. And its coverage, regardless, is pretty nice. Play Rough, Knock Off, Waterfall, Aqua Jet, Superpower hits basically most mons in the tier, which is really nice. Speed tier is a little bit lacking. I kind of wish it was a little bit faster, but it's a trade-off for its power at least. So it is susceptible to being revenge killed by stuff like Rotom and anything faster than that speed tier. And a lot of times people will have a switch into Azumarill, like a solid switch in that can deal with it. Usually, if they have like any sort of grass type, that's probably fine. Mostly it will be like a water type of their own.
Or Amoonguss.
Or Amoonguss, yeah. And another thing with Azumarill, if it's belly drum, then it can be punished pretty easily. If you're like trying to belly drum on like a Clef, for example, Clef can just if it's like a life orb, Moonblast or something, it can like take you out or severely chip you down, put you in range of other stuff. Also, like there's so many different priority moves right nowadays to deal with offense that Azumarill doesn't really snowball like it used to. Like you can easily get picked off by other priority like Scissor and Talonflame and stuff like that. So really It's still underrated, but I don't think it's as good as it used to be, just with all the offense moving around.
One more thing, Volcanion also kind of just blanks it, with the you resist its fairy, you're immune to Aqua Jet, then you could just either Steam Eruption it, or Sludge Wave it, or Toxic it, or Haze it, so also hurt it. But, you can still run Choice Band set, still run AV, and that's solid sometimes. So it's an interesting mon, just not quite as good as it's been in the past.
True.
Okay, Breloom. So another Sporemon. So Breloom also has a lot of things going for it. So that Spore, it's got priority in Mach Punch. It has Technician, like Scissor, so it gets like a boost to its 60 base damage and lower moves. So that makes a Mach Punch hit harder. That makes a Rock Tomb basically basically a stronger Rock Slide, 90 base damage, which is really solid, and lowers the speed of things that come in. So then, it's really threatening. It can run Toxic Orb with Poison Heal. So it's kind of like a Gliscor in that sense. Actually, the original Gliscor. Gliscor got that later. For those that don't know. Breloom did it first. So you get Spore, Substitute, Focus Punch, Leech Seed. It gets Facade, So, but actually hits harder compared to like a Gliscor.
Oh, yes.
Swords Dance. Gets Force Palm, becomes a 90 base power move with Technician, and then has a 30% chance to paralyze. So it gets a lot of like really interesting moves. Could run different sets, even Scarf. So it's a threatening mon. Basically been a threatening mon. Its whole time existing pretty much since Gen 3. And that hasn't really changed as much in Gen 6. So even with all the fairies and stuff around, well, it's all the fairies, there's like only a couple, but even with the fairies and other things of that nature hanging around, even Talonflame, it can still find like a niche.
Next up is Gardevoir. So, I don't think I'm qualified to speak about Gardevoir because we have like a bunch of experts here, and I think Sarah is one of them.
I don't know, an expert. I just really like that it hits hard. It's kind of like I think I like the special version of Mega Metagame, although not quite as scary. So that Pixelate Hyper Voice, it's like a truck. Got the Side Shock to hit on the physical defensive side. Has Focus Blast to hit everything else, and then the last move really is up to you. I like Calm Mind to make it actually like about as strong as a Mega Metacham. But many people like Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Thunder Wave, Encore, I believe it gets as well.
Oh yes.
So it's a great wall breaker. I think people are intimidated by it because it's so hot. I mean, because its bulk isn't quite that great. But honestly, I think it's underutilized. I think it's really good, and I have a few teams with it where everybody puts in work. So give Gardevoir a chance, guys.
True. Its utility is so under.
You should get next two.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Oh, thank you for giving me Klefki.
Oh yeah, of course.
So next up is Gyarados. So Gyarados isn't as high as its Mega counterpart, but it can still put in work nonetheless. Most of the times you'll be seeing like a DD set with Waterfall, and then usually like Bounce or something to hit grasses. And with Moxie, you can put in a lot of work. It can sweep through a bunch of teams as long as they don't have like a Rotom or other mon like that. I think it's just Rotom that is annoying to it because it can hit electrics with water types attacks. You can hit water types with its flying stab, so it's pretty nice in that sense. And I think
Zapdos too could be the
Yeah, true. So it's also like similar to Mega Gyarados. It's also held back by its low speed. So oftentimes you'll probably need a second DD to actually sweep a team. But it is pretty nice when you do get a sweep going. I think the most dangerous set I've encountered is like DD Resto Chesto, which was absolutely disgusting to go up against.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, but it's one of those underrated threats where like if you don't like prep for it, if you don't have like a Rotom or Zapdos, then you're really in for it. Unless you get like Rocks Up or you have some sort of Hazer or Toxic user or something like that. And it also has like a bunch of utility options. Actually, I think there's just like Taunt, but if you're scared, you can sub and
That could be scary.
T-Wave and stuff like that. But yeah, it's got its own set of tools to deal with, and I think it's also kind of slept on.
Yeah.
All right, next up, our savior, Faded Keys, aka Klefki. So Klefki, very underrated mon in the tier. It can do so many different things for a tier team. You can set up spikes, you can set up screens, it can foul play a bunch of stuff. It can, if you're a degenerate, you can also swagger some stuff. But yeah, it's defensive typing is really solid. Being able to switch into Weavile is pretty nice. Being able to switch into Zam is pretty nice. And it also has like decent coverage options. It can hit Diancie, for example, trying to come in with Flash Cannon. It can also foul play stuff like Drill with it trying to spin, and you can also like set up Magnet Rise and 1v1 Drill pretty easily too. It also has access to T-Wave and Toxic, and I guess I didn't mention this before, which I should have. It also has Prankster, so it gets +1 priority on all its status moves. Yeah, so that's why that's its main niche compared to other like screens users and spike setters, because it gets priority status moves, which is really nice. And unlike in Sun and Moon, the dark types are affected by Klefki status moves. So if you're trying to like Toxic a dark type like Weavile or T-Wave dark type like Weavile, you can go ahead because it's gonna work. So that's why Klefki is pretty nice. And
great support mon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So now another Mega. We have Manectric. So Mega Manectric. So I think Mega Manectric is actually pretty straightforward Mega. You know, the set you'll mainly see is Volt Switch, Flamethrower or Overheat, Hidden Power Ice, and Thunderbolts. I think that's like 90% of sets.
Yep.
Is that. So it has Intimidate, which is nice, you know. So sometimes you'll see it with like a Voltron core with a Lando. So you have like double Intimidate, and it does a U-turn and Volt Switch out and everything. And you know, it has like Zapdos coverage pretty much. So honestly, even better because Flamethrower is better than Heat Wave, I'd say, and it gets Overheat as an option too, which Zapdos doesn't get. But the main thing holding it back is that it's a Mega. So even though it has the same speed tier as Mega Lopunny, which is a 135 speed and 135 special attack. Yeah, actually, it's kind of like a special version of Lopunny in some ways, but it doesn't have like the fake out like Lopunny does. It doesn't have like its stabs hit everything pretty much. Like there's like no pure switch into Lopunny stabs. Unlike Manectric, which you kind of have to guess sometimes. Which if you guess right, that's great. But sometimes it's like a guessing game. And if you guess wrong, then they get like their Garflanda win or whatever the case may be. And you don't resist rocks like Lopunny does. And yeah, sorry, I'm comparing a lot to Lopunny. It's a solid Mega, especially with like the rise of like some other water types in the tier, like Volcanion, Manaphy, stuff like that. So it's still it's a good mon. It's just it's competing in that Mega slot with other mons, and like I said, it's pretty one note. So just a fast pivot.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this a little bit in the SPL midseason analysis. I think the main way main shines is by making its teammates shine, and what we mean by that is like Mega Main can force a lot of switches due to its fast offensive presence and nice coverage. So for example, main forces in the opponent's bulky ground, right? So it pairs really nice with stuff like Crawdaunt and Kyurem that can capitalize on that. So while main isn't doing much by itself, it allows its teammates to shine, gives them mostly free switch-ins to put in a lot of work. And Yeah, I'd say like I'd agree with Sarah. It doesn't do much by itself. It's very straightforward. Um, but yeah, don't sleep on it. It can help its teammates out a lot by forcing those switches.
Okay, you got next?
Yeah, I got you. So next one is Skarm. Skarm been around since GSC, basically doing the same thing it's always done, being a physical tank, spiking up, stealth rocking up. You guys know. Also, it it's decent. Like defensive typing is pretty solid to switch into stuff like Metagross and Lopunny. Isn't really a switch into Mega Medicham, but it can still put in a lot of work versus physical attackers with the counter. And I think Amir has been using like a Spadef Skarmory, which has been used to like switch into Diancie and stuff, which is pretty interesting as well. And there's also a couple unique options with Taunt Skarm and Custap Skarm on more hyper offensive builds. Anything else you want to?
Counter.
Oh yes, counter.
Counter. I do like the counter with the sturdy.
Oh
That's
yes,
nice.
yeah.
So if you're at full, you can just counter like the high jump kick and kill the Mega Medi. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward one as well. It's got good typing, as you said. It gets access to spikes and stealth rock. Defog, solid. It's a solid defogger,
Mhm.
and it has whirlwind or roar. Yeah, it's solid. I feel like it's a little passive compared to like a Zapdos, which gets a Volt Switch and stuff, and could actually like damage stuff a little better.
Mhm.
But it's not bad. It's why it's in B tier. It's not bad.
Yeah.
All right, now we got Tangrowth. So I used to love Tangrowth a lot. I used to play on like most of my teams. The Tangrowth in ORAS is generally run physically defensive, which if you look at its stats, you think, well, duh. It's got like, what was that, like base 140 or 125 defense. I forget. Yeah, well, base 125 defense and like 50 Spadef. Well, you can run a Assault Vest, which is generally worse, and make it like more of a mixed defensive mixed wall type of thing. But in ORAS, there's so many more physical threats that it can check easily just being a grass type. Like it resists ground. It can, resist water, electric, and even some super effective physical attacks. It really doesn't take much from. So you can kind of come in on like some ice punches from like a Mega Metagross, and like I think it's a 3 KO if you're at like fully invested physical defense. Anyway, so it's a bulky thing. Its grass typing helps it generally, and got Giga Drain, for recovery. So it gets Leaf Storm, so it actually like can't be a little more offensive than Amoonguss.
Mm-hmm.
So it got Regenerator, which I don't know if I mentioned, but it gets Regenerator. So good almost by default. And it gets some really nice coverage options. Like it can run like mixed. You can run like Earthquake. I like running Rock Slide to punish Volcaronas.
Oh yes.
That might try to step on me, or Charizard wise that might try switch in, or Talonflames. It gets Sleep Powder, Stun Spore. It gets Focus Blast. It gets HP Fire. It gets HP Fire. Like everything else. But it can only be one like a Ferrothorn opposing Ferrothorn pretty easily. Knockoff. It gets Knockoff, guys. It's just a solid bulky mon.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, it doesn't. It's not passive, but there's other mons that maybe do other things too. So you may not see it that much, but being a physical wall or sponge, honestly, it's arguably better than Slowbro in that department. So it's definitely very good. For certain teams, it may even be better depending on the team makeup. But yeah, it's just I just think it's not quite as splashable as a Slowbro, but it's still very good.
Yeah, I agree. Alright, so next up we have Tarak. Tarak is also an underrated threat in the tier. I think all sets of Tarak are underrated. They can all put in work in various different ways. So Ban Tarak, really solid versus like fatter balanced builds, and can punch holes through stall teams at times too. And the main thing with Bantarak is that it capitalizes on its offensive typing, which honestly has no switch-ins besides like Doublade or something. But yeah, the main thing with Track, 2-hit KOs basically everything. And yeah, it kind of opens the other team up for your teammates to go in. Solid speed tier, really nice attack. And as we mentioned before, it can capitalize on a lot of different things to punch holes through teams. In my opinion, my favorite set is the SD Dual Dance, which can put in work through bulkier teams and more offensive teams. And that can also run a variety of different sets. If you're a safe guy, you can run Rock Slide too. It pretty much does a similar role with the additional chance to flinch the opponent. Some people also run priority on their Tarax, like Quick Attack, which can be nice to pick off stuff like Volcarona and Thundurus. And yeah, it also resists rocks, which is nice. I think Scarf Track is also similar to Landorus in a sense that it's really nice tool to revenge kill a lot of different threats in the tier. It's really nice to pick off Lopunny. It's really nice to pick off Weavile. It's really nice to pick off Mega Alakazam. So yeah, it can put in a lot of work. The only bad thing about it, I think, is the steel weakness, which leaves it susceptible to being like revenge kill after CCing. And the other thing is that sometimes it does become a guessing game between the rock stab and the fighting stab. So if you lock into the wrong move, you lose a lot of momentum. So I think those are the main things holding it back. But it also is like a very straightforward offensive mon. And if you want to hit, if you're an offensive guy, you want to just hit the opponent as hard as you can. Let's go for Tarak.
Yeah, I really like Terrakion too. I really like the Choice Band set because I don't like thinking too much. I just like clicking CC or Stone Edge. But you know, like you said though, it's it's got pretty spammable options. It can kind of come in on rocks and stuff. Honestly, I think I like it a little more in Keldeo lately, being choice locked. Especially since you can kind of like patch its weakness pretty easily. I think just running like a Slowbro with it to like punish stuff like Landos that might switch in or be annoying for it. So ship down the Lando and then it can kind of break through all the other team. Or just hitting like 2 Stone Edges in a row. Could really deal with other things that get in the way. But yeah, it's good mod. Definitely something I think underrated. Okay, now we have Thundurus-Therian. So, Thundurus-Therian trades the speed of a regular Thundurus for more offense. So it's got 145 special attack, which is pretty crazy. There aren't many special attackers that aren't megas that go that high that are in the tier. But the issue is, like we said, it loses some of its speed. So even though its speed tier is still solid, I believe it's base, I'll just look it up real quick. So it's base 101. So that's still solid, it's still at speeds, base 100s. But man, like missing out on speeding Keldeo and stuff, really kind of sucks. But I don't even get any more bulk, like some of the other Therian forms. So it really just trades the speed for more special attack. But that being said, it can still run like a dual dance set, agility and nasty pod maybe, or even just agility, and then have like the 3 setup moves. The 3 coverage moves: T-Bolt, Focus Blast, HP Ice. Going there with like leftovers or life orb or something. And it has a Volt Absorb now instead of the Prankster, so it's basically electric immunity. It's electric and ground immunity, which is nice. So it gives you some time to set up. It's definitely a scary mon. I don't think it's quite as scary as regular Thundurus, because regular Thundurus has, I think, a few more tricks up the sleeve. And you never really know with regular Thundurus what it could be.
True.
Like with the Therian form, it's a little more clear when you see it, what it's going to do.
Yeah.
That being said, it still hits hard, and it has, its coverage is, it's everything it needs.
Yeah.
So.
And I think Thundurus T is like very scary. I think it's usually scariest with the Manaphy. So ways people usually revenge Manaphy is with electric type moves, and
they bring it in.
and the grass type. So yeah, you can just bring it in and then T-Wave that way. And it's often people's ways of dealing with Talonflame on offense. So people just switch their Thundurus on a Talonflame and then they can set up on it with the Nasty Plot and stuff. So I think that's the main reason why Thundi T is used over normal Thundurus. But like you said, it's like not as good generally as the normal incarnate version.
Yeah.
And then T-Tar Mega is next. T-Tar, I'd say, is very similar to Gyarados. Similar stab combination that's very hard to switch into. Also held back by its speed. Pretty bulky, but still susceptible to stuff like Mach Punch and Bullet Punch and Aqua Jet and stuff. So it can put in some work. I'd say most work you can put in is like a standard defensive set with Stealth Rock Pursuit and stuff for more bulk. But DD can still put in a work sometimes. I think Saera made a team with DD Tar that destroyed Bird Spam, which is pretty cool. But I think
didn't test it yet.
I think Edge DD Edge Ice Fire coverage is pretty solid. It can hit a wide variety of things. But yeah, it's kind of held back by its lackluster defensive typing and low speed.
Yeah. I think speed's the biggest killer because that +1 still is outsped by Mega Opening. So you need like 2 DDs, and that may be pretty hard. And like Anvil said, it's pretty weak to many forms of priority. An Aqua Jet, Mach Punch, Bullet Punch, and of course the quad fighting weakness doesn't help. So yeah, you don't see it too much. Additionally, if you're running a sand team, you'll typically want like a smooth rock or whatever the hell it's called on Tyranitar to lengthen your sand turns, and you often want to pair it with like Megazard Y, typically, or some other Mega that can benefit it more. If you're running Mega T-Tar on sand, you're making the sand turns less, so it'll make your Excadrill less threatening late game, or it gave you less wiggle room basically, and yeah, so it's a little more hard to fit on a team, but it's strong as hell. Base 165 attack, I believe. It's a really strong pursuit user. Solid rocker. Just it would appreciate if it had more speed for sure. A few more points could have come a long way. All right, finally, of the B tier we have Mega Venusaur, Venusaur Mega, as listed here. So same typing as Amoonguss, but much better speed tier. Great ability and thick fat. So it basically loses its fire and ice weakness. So it's only weak to psychic and flying. And much like Amoonguss, it still gets annoying support moves. You still get knockoff. You still get Stun Spore, I believe. You get Sleep Powder, right? I'm not making that up, right?
Yep. Gets it.
Yeah. Gets Giga Drain, Synthesis, Sludge Bomb to punish Clef on a switch in. It even gets Block, guys. It gets Block. It gets Earthquake. It gets Leaf Storm, Leech Seed. It even gets Swords Dance if you want to run a physical set. Guys, it gets String Shot, Worry Seed. It's okay. It's very fat. I think Synthesis is nice over nothing, but if it was like a recover type move with like 16 PP, that'd be even better. But besides the Sword Dance option, it doesn't really have much setup. It's kind of like Heatran for me. I think of it, where it's bulky, but it's not really great at doing anything. It's not a great rocker. Heatran's not a great rocker. This doesn't get rocks, sadly. But it doesn't even get Clear Smog. How much I got Clear Smog? That might have been more helpful, so you don't have to run. I'm not gonna Gastrodon or something with it. It does get Curse, too. I forgot about that. It does get Curse. But, yeah, to me, it's really bulky. You can run it more offensively, so I think defensive is probably better. So I mean, I have run offensively, so I'm not sure why I'm saying that, but it is flexible. You know, it's got, you know, solid all around stats. You know, like great bulk especially, and usable attack, and solid special attack. Yeah, it's really just the fact that for taking a Mega slot, I think you would probably prefer it to either have a setup move, or more utility, or, you know, something of that nature. But it doesn't. So that's why it's B tier. It's not bad. It's just, you know, it's probably other megas you'd prefer to use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's all I got for Mega Venusaur.
Yeah, so Venusaur has its own niche. I'd say it's pretty solid. Like, I'd say it was solid versus the screen stuff going around with it being able to deal with Serp and Altaria. But yeah, but
that's true. It does have good matchups against some stuff.
Yeah, versus some stuff. Yeah, so it's B tier, like Sarah said. It's like held back by a lot. Like it's only good in certain matchups, and yeah, that I'd say the lack of recovery is pretty unfortunate. Unlike like the region grass mons like Amoonguss and stuff, because not being able to synthesis with sand up is pretty annoying. And then
yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, the PP is so low. It's like it's kind of tough to use, especially if you like switch into like Keldeo and get burnt. And yeah, that's honestly what
yeah. Yes. All right, guys. I think that's about it, though.
Yep.
All right. We did A- to B. Wow. Surprised we made it. All right, guys. So, hope you enjoyed. I'm sure some of our picks maybe were a little spicy. Honestly, well, there's only one one I'm like considering how we put it where it was, but I'm gonna leave that, you know, keep that to myself for now. But I hope you guys, you know, at least understand where we're coming from. If you have any objections, or you think we missed somebody, or somebody's too high, please complain in chat. We'll definitely read it. But yeah, next video you'll see us getting even further into depth here.
Yep. All right, guys. So we'll see you guys around for the next one. Peace.